One very useful way of thinking of surrender, which is a complete path to self-realization and spiritual awakening along with self-inquiry, is that surrender is the practice of reducing the tension over which you have deliberate, voluntary control. I'll repeat that. Surrender is a practice of reducing the tension over which you have deliberate, voluntary control. And you can think of it as happening over 3 dimensions: the physical, the attentional, and the decisional. They all echo each other and affect each other. But let's start with the physical. So, as I often tell people, all our life, typically, we are grasping at things. Our fist is grasping at things, and this is often quite literally true. When you do grasp at things, it can happen that that grasping is something which feels like you are contracting through your direct effort. The muscles in, let's say, your hand. To the extent that it feels like you are tensing those muscles, surrender would say, relax. What does relax mean? Literally, let go of that effort which feels like your effort. There's effort that goes on in the mind and body that doesn't necessarily feel like your effort, except in a very broad sense, maybe, right? The heart beats, and we breathe, and we even walk and talk and do many things seemingly involuntarily and automatically. Those things don't seem to require our deliberate, voluntary effort. Where, however, in the physical, for example, it does require our deliberate, voluntary effort to relax that effort. Wherever we see that tension arise in the physical, which feels like I'm maintaining it, to relax that tension. Now, even when you have relaxed this tension, the mind and body will keep doing things. And so it's not necessarily about stopping your mind and body from doing certain things, because that would merely introduce another type of tension. So, for example, you decide, I'm just going to sit on this couch. That decision might be relaxing under certain circumstances, but it might actually itself constitute a source of physical tension in other circumstances. It might well feel like it's taking a lot of deliberate, voluntary effort to keep myself rigidly in this position on this couch. So in that circumstance, relaxing that deliberate, voluntary effort might mean that you get up from the couch. There's a natural flow of automatic action that happens. And there is a seeming overlay, I say seeming because the reality is an illusion, of the effort, of the tension that you deliberately, voluntarily control. That portion and that portion alone, you try to open up and relax. Drop the effort associated with your deliberate action. Recognizing that non-movement of the body may itself be something that requires your deliberate voluntary effort, right? So it's not really about movement or non-movement. It's that there's a sense of I am doing this. To the extent that that feeling is there, to relax. To relax the body, and then to get to the next level, think about the attention. What is the attention doing? The attention can feel like it's deliberately, voluntarily focusing on something. Wherever that feels like that's the case, to just relax the attention. The definition of relaxed attention is that while focused attention has an object, it's focused on something. Relaxed attention has no object. It just relaxes away from objects. Now, saying this, in the practice of surrender, there are a couple of things that you do want to concentrate on. The attention cannot be completely relaxed. It has to focus on 2 or 3 things that are all tightly interlinked. One is the action of surrender itself, which is ignoring and relaxing all thoughts in this way of reducing tension, which I'm explaining. It's about vigilantly keeping up that practice, and so attempting not to be seduced into increasing that deliberate voluntary effort, right? To as much as possible decline to exert the effort in the first place, that deliberate voluntary effort, rather than exert it and then relax it. If that happens, that happens, but better to decline to exert that effort in the first place, and to allow what happens involuntarily and automatically alone to occur. And then there's one more level, and again, these are all interrelated, but the so-called decisional level, which is that decision, which is the sense of will. Like, I am deciding to do this. I shall do this. Right? As soon as that decision occurs, it can be a mental event. It feels like a sort of mental muscle is being invoked and used to relax the deliberate, voluntary effort associated with that. So just as with the physical body, when you relax that deliberate voluntary effort, the body will still do things. When you will relax deliberate voluntary attentional effort, things will still be attended to in various ways. They'll be attended to involuntarily and automatically. To the extent that any such attention feels like a burden, like, I'm doing this, then you'd want to relax. Similarly with decisions. Decisions will be taken. But to the extent that they involve you, that feeling of I'm making the decision, then you would relax. And this relaxation of tension along these different dimensions constitutes the ignore and relax instruction of surrender. And if one keeps this up and vigilantly keeps it up without falling asleep into some sort of trance or other absorption into a pleasant state where one forgets about surrender. One brings the mind to a relatively relaxed, relatively quiet state. But it is only relative, because this state has been achieved through what is nevertheless a doing. It is the doing of surrender. Yes, it's about reducing tension, but you're still doing the reduction of tension. And there may be times as well where it feels very difficult indeed to surrender, where thoughts assault you, and you feel drawn in despite yourself, and you forget surrender. And then later you say, oh, why did I get drawn in? Why did I put in that deliberate voluntary effort? But it seems inevitable. So there are some issues with this practice of surrender. It doesn't seem perfect, and still requires a modicum of effort. Even if one becomes very good at it, still there's effort required, there's vigilance required, there's some sense of deliberate voluntary effort in the practice of surrender. So practicing surrender, coming to that space of quiet, which is a sacred space, a relatively quiet space, a relatively low tension space, low tension in that sense of voluntary deliberate effort. In that space then to inquire deeply, intensely, and continuously as much as possible, how can even this be surrendered? What does it take to completely drop away all effort? Or who is a surrenderer? Who is surrendering? These are all questions that can't be answered logically, but when one poses them or focuses on them, and any of these are fine, they're all basically the same question stated somewhat differently, eventually the door unlocks. The door unlocks when the mental habits that keep you in the deliberate voluntary effort and which thereby distract the mind, when those habits have been sufficiently weakened through the deliberate voluntary practice of surrender, and then this final question about complete surrender is asked, then the door eventually opens. So we are redirecting attention and deliberate voluntary effort from the many, many things towards which it's currently dispersed. And we're trying to concentrate that deliberate voluntary effort on surrender alone, relaxing as much as possible everything else. But not relaxing in the sense of a forced, deliberate, stiff, rigid inactivity that itself requires a lot of tension, but to sort of allow whatever happens without your involvement to happen, including negative emotions, negative thoughts, really anything. And there may be thoughts that come up as well, like, this is really difficult. And to recognize those thoughts too can be ignored. And we can think of ignoring thoughts as a refusal to engage with deliberate voluntary effort. We can think of ignoring thoughts as declining to contract using, again, what feels like our voluntary effort, that muscle of mind, the attentional muscle of mind, the decisional muscle of mind, and quite literally, the physical muscle of the body. They're all connected anyhow. So to relax, as far as you're concerned, your involvement with the physical, the attentional, the decisional, to allow only things that go on that do not require your deliberate voluntary effort, and to focus instead on question of how to complete the surrender, or who exactly it is that's surrendering. If that question is asked with earnestness, intensity, and continuity, it will become clear that perfect surrender has actually been your true nature the entire time, and that the very notion of deliberate voluntary effort is itself flawed.